For 30 years, my pond was the centerpiece of my property, a place where my grandchildren learned to fish, and my wife and I spent countless evenings watching the sunset. The HOA never said a word until they discovered the land beneath it had tripled in value. That's when they came for my pond, and that's when I decided to expose their corruption for all to see. Comment below with the wildest HOA rule you've ever seen and hit subscribe so you don't miss the shocking ending. My wife Margaret and I bought our little piece of heaven back in 1989. It was a modest 3-bedroom home on 2 acres of land with a beautiful natural pond right in the center. Back then, the neighborhood was new, filled with families like ours who had worked hard and were looking for a peaceful place to settle down. The HOA was just a formality, mostly handling road maintenance and making sure everyone kept their lawns mowed. I remember spending weekends with my son, clearing out the overgrowth around that pond and stocking it with bass and bluegill. We built a small wooden dock together. Nothing fancy, just a place to sit and dangle your feet in the water. Margaret planted wildflowers along the banks, and over the years, it became our sanctuary. When the neighborhood transitioned to more of a retirement community in the early 2000s, things stayed mostly the same. Sure, the HOA got a bit more particular about landscaping, but they never bothered us about the pond. In fact, several neighbors would compliment how beautiful it looked, especially when the water lilies bloomed in summer. Everything changed last fall when a new HOA board was elected, led by a woman named Patricia. Let's just say she had a reputation for being difficult. Within weeks of taking office, she sent out a notice announcing a complete review of community assets and property boundaries. If you think this HOA is out of control now, just wait for the twist coming up. Subscribe so you never miss another instant karma story. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Official HOA letterhead stating that my pond was being reclassified as Community Water Feature 7. And that I would need to cease all private use immediately. I laughed it off at first. Surely this was a mistake. Margaret and I had the original property survey from when we bought the house, clearly showing the pond within our property lines. I called the HOA office and was transferred to Patricia herself. "Mr. Henderson," she said in a tone that suggested she was talking to a child, "the original development plans from 1987 show all water features as community property. Your personal survey doesn't override the community's founding documents." I asked her to send me whatever documentation she was referring to, and she agreed, though she added that fines would begin accruing if the pond wasn't made accessible to all residents by the 1st of the month. When the documents arrived, I immediately saw the problem. There was indeed a small note on the corner of the original development map that said, "Water features to be maintained by HOA." But it didn't specify which water features, and my property deed explicitly included the pond as part of our land. I drafted a polite but firm response, citing my deed and requesting a meeting to discuss the matter. That's when the harassment really began. The fines started at $50 per day for non-compliance with HOA directives. Then came the threatening letters about liens on my property. Patricia even sent someone to take pictures of my grandchildren fishing in the pond, with a note saying, "Unauthorized use of community assets." The breaking point came when I received a certified letter stating that the HOA had voted to reclaim the pond and would be draining it for maintenance and safety improvements the following week. That night, Margaret found me sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., surrounded by decades of documents. "What are you doing, honey?" she asked. "I'm not letting them take our pond, Margaret," I said, determination in my voice. "This isn't just about water and land, it's about principle." Over the next few days, I visited the county records office, hired a land surveyor, and even tracked down the original developer of our community, now in his 80s and living in Arizona. What I discovered would change everything. Buried in the original property deed for our house was a clause that I'd completely forgotten about. It stated that the pond and the land beneath it were explicitly granted to the property owner in perpetuity as a condition of the original purchase. The developer had included this special provision for the handful of properties that had natural water features because he wanted to ensure they would be well maintained by the homeowners rather than becoming community responsibilities. But that wasn't all. Through a friendly contact at the county planning department, I learned that Patricia had been quietly meeting with developers interested in buying up water features in our community. The plan was to drain several ponds and sell the land for commercial development. Armed with this information, I requested to speak at the next HOA meeting. The room was packed. Patricia had apparently been telling neighbors that I was hoarding community resources and refusing to follow rules. When my turn came, I calmly walked to the front, holding a folder of documents. Patricia sat smugly at the head table, already preparing her rebuttal. "Members of the board, neighbors," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here today not just to defend my property rights, but to expose something that affects every one of us." I held up my original property deed. "This document, which I've had verified by the county, explicitly states that my pond and the land beneath it belong to me and my heirs. The HOA has no claim whatsoever." Murmurs rippled through the room. Patricia started to object, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished," I said firmly, "because this isn't just about my pond. It's about what's been happening behind closed doors." I then presented copies of emails between Patricia and several developers, discussing the sale of community water assets and how much they could profit from draining the ponds and selling the land. I even had a recording of a phone call where Patricia admitted she knew some of the ponds were privately owned, but was confident homeowners wouldn't put up a fight. The room erupted. Neighbors who had previously been suspicious of me now turned their anger toward Patricia and the board members who had supported her. By the end of that meeting, Patricia had resigned in disgrace. The entire board was dissolved, and an emergency election was scheduled. The new board, led by a reasonable neighbor I'd known for years, not only apologized publicly, but voted to cover all my legal expenses and establish a committee to review and clarify all property rights in the community. A few weeks later, Patricia moved out of the neighborhood. I heard through the grapevine that she was facing an investigation by the State Real Estate Commission for her actions. These days, my pond is more peaceful than ever. My grandchildren still come to fish, and Margaret and I still watch the sunset from our little dock. The difference now is that neighbors often stop by to chat, and several have even asked me to help them review their own property documents. If there's a lesson in all this, it's that you should never assume someone in authority has the right to take what's yours. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, do your homework, and fight for what's right. Because in the end, justice isn't just served, it's earned. What's the most ridiculous thing your HOA has tried to claim ownership of? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of instant karma and justice served.